Hello and welcome to the Let's Talk Azure podcast with your hosts, Sam Foote.
And Alan Armstrong.
If you're new here, we're a pair of Azure and Office 365 focused IT security professionals. Each episode, we talk about a specific topic in this space. This week, it's episode 19 of season 2. We're going to talk around Microsoft Power Platform, an application creation, automation, and dashboarding platform that enables non developers to build and consume data within their organization. Hey, Alan, how are you doing?
Hey Sam, I'm not doing too bad. How are you?
Yeah, really good, thank you. Really good. It's now past Halloween, so we're officially allowed to talk about Christmas. I mean, that might trigger some people and things like that. How early does Christmas start in your household?
It's start of December for me.
Okay, yeah. So you're a semi-normal person, I suppose, right? No, it's just amazing. I just love how it's like right, even on Halloween itself, like Halloween is done, right? Get that out the way, and then right, bang, it's just a run up to Christmas. So yeah, it's gonna be good. I think it's a good time. The holiday season is a good time for people to sort of relax, reset, and then come into next year. I'm sure that's what we'll be doing. So yeah, it's going to be a fun and exciting time.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay, right. So this episode we're going to talk around Power Platform. Alan is going to be taking on the role of expert here. I'm going to fire some questions into him. Power Platform is pretty chunky. There's a lot to it. I think every sort of product within Power Platform again could be an episode on it by itself, and we will definitely do that and dive in deeper. But here we're really aiming to give you a high level overview of what Power Platform is, maybe some of the areas that you might want to go away and investigate and potentially utilize. So, Alan, just to start off with and to kick us off, can you just give us a high level overview of what the Power Platform is?
yeah. Sure. So the Microsoft Power Platform has been around. Oh god, it must be like 3 or 4 years now, and it's evolved quite a lot since when it first came out. So Power Platform is, as it kind of states, a platform for um, in building internal sort of automation applications and things like that, when it's all like low code, no code for the majority of it. So the kind of key areas within that are Power Apps, which is around your building applications. You've got Power Automate, which used to be called Microsoft Flow, if anyone was looking at this when it first came out. You've got Power BI, and you've got Virtual Agent. So the Power Platform kind of consists of sort of four areas. So this kind of is, you know, analytics, um, acting, so the Power Apps, automation with Power Automate, and then assistance with the Virtual Agent.
Okay, so what we're sort of saying here is this is a platform that you don't need to host, maintain, or anything like that. Is this completely a Microsoft taking all of that away from you? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, yeah. So it's a SaaS, software as a service. So that's yeah, you just pay for um, in effect licensing to use it or consumption, and it kind of backs onto or alongside Microsoft 365 Dynamics. So not necessarily diving into the CRM and full Dynamics, but in effect, it's sort of it assists Dynamics quite a lot, but you can use it separate as well. So there's a lot of data. It's all sort of drops down onto the Dataverse.
Okay, so could you just give us a quick primer on Dataverse? I think it might be quite good to understand how sort of Dataverse. Did we do an episode on Dataverse previously? We haven't done one on Dataverse yet, have we?
No, we haven't. We've talked about it when we were doing the architecting serverless
Yeah,
environment and stuff like that.
yeah,
But
that's right.
yeah, Dataverse in effect is a tabled storage environment where you can build, excuse me, tables, and you can secure it using row based access control, and I think even column based. It's it's very dynamic. You can build your tables visually and things like that, so you don't have to. In essence, it feels like SQL from a like how you can do some parts to it, but you don't have to know SQL to build it. You don't have to run those commands. It's like a GUI for it kind of thing. So you can
So
do
yeah.
go on.
Okay, so Dataverse is effectively for the Power Platform. Would it be true to say that the Dataverse is, one way of or the first party way of storing data for inside the Power Platform, if that makes sense? Is it, you
Yeah,
mention it's SQL like, so what I'm thinking about that is that you've got, tables of data, relationships, entities or rows within those tables with maybe specialized logic, like you mentioned, sort of row-based access control and things like that. Is Dataverse really underpinning, what Power Platform is the sort of the nicety and the user interface and experience on top of it?
yeah, it is a good way to store information because it's within your tenant, so it's not like having another SQL or another data endpoint that's outside of your tenant in effect. Apart from SharePoint, OneDrive, things like that, but it's SharePoint OneDrive is great, but you can't really store like the table based data without it
Yeah.
being like in a storage account or and things like that. So
Yeah, because traditionally, if you went to a structured data store, like let's take SQL Server, Azure SQL, whatever dialect of SQL that you fancy, um, you do need to know specialist skills in terms of bringing those systems online, managing them, optimizing them, and things like that. My assumption is, with the intro that we had, that Dataverse is more of a better user experience and more approachable way to build those data structures instead of having to go you know to like the effort of bringing up a SQL Azure instance and having that specialist SQL knowledge.
yeah, absolutely, yeah, it's definitely a lot. It is quite simple and very quite flexible from the
Okay.
interface perspective.
Okay, yeah, we won't get hung up on Power Platform, but I think it was just good to just quickly skirt into that topic to understand sort of the glue that binds all of this stuff together, right? Because it is a big old beast, Power Platform in a good way for sure. Okay, so the first item that you talked about was Power Apps. So how so coming from a development background, right, where everything is built bespoke and you get really expensive technologists to come in and build, completely bespoke user experiences and apps and make them mobile ready and things like that. How is Power Apps built, and how is it making it easier to create app experiences?
Yeah, so it's really. I mean, from experience, it's really easy. I mean, some of the stuff that you've built from code and things like that. Take me. Well, I'd have to learn all of that sort of stuff. So, but yeah, Power Apps is a really good sort of drag and drop sort of interface where you can design your app. It's very simplistic. You can make it quite complicated if you want to. You can do some very complex or quite some cool things with it. I've done it in the past, but yeah, you can with the interface you can drop a label, name it, or put the text in it and drop a text a text entry box or a drop down list, and and then that could be populated. So you could build like a really quick form. It could be one of the examples that Microsoft has is like a doing your holiday request kind of form and then populating it into an Excel spreadsheet or into the Dataverse. But you can build like the forms and click, create submit buttons and things like that. Um, and then it can post that data anywhere in theory, um, because there is a ecosystem of connectors. And the ecosystem, that those connectors are very similar to, or in fact, practically identical to the Logic App connectors that we talked about previously. Because in effect, that sort of part, Logic Apps kind of are using the same for some parts of the same technology when we talk about Power Automate. But yes, you can, a standard user, a non-developer can easily build a form to do a task or a data collection, or update data. Um, and with like the connectors, that your data source could be an Excel spreadsheet, and it could, show you, you could update this, records in that spreadsheet by inputting data, or you could retrieve data or search that data. Um, as well as, send, I guess you could get some form of automation to say send this templated email to, somebody internally, or to, to external, I guess, it's if you have the permissions to sort of do that.
Okay, so these uh, I'm going to dive in a bit as we go through instead of waiting to the end, if that's okay, to
Hmm.
ask you a few more questions, because I think because some of these topics for Power Platform are so different, I think it's good to cover them off sort of as we go, if that makes sense. Normally we
Yeah,
do a
makes sense.
wrap up at the end, but so so what you're saying to me is you're saying that the I'll call it the interface builder of Power Apps is really approachable for people that aren't professional developers, let's say, right? I'll use the example that you've got an operations team which needs somebody to fill out a form. I mean, forms aren't a great one because there are tooling within Microsoft's ecosystem to do forms, right? But we'll use that example, right? So let's say I need a system to be able to like capture a form. Maybe somebody's got to fill out a form as part of their job role every week, let's say, right? Now, forget about jogging their memory. We can talk about that in the future, later, I suppose. But in terms of when that user then is presented the form, I can effectively drag and drop components onto there for different things that I want to capture. So, for instance, I might want to capture um, you could probably infer it automatically, but I might want to capture their name. I might want to capture their job role. I might want to capture some bespoke information for that like event. I've got the ability to structure my app, I assume, in whatever way I see fit.
Y-
And yeah, go on.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And probably maybe another example, because you're right, there are forms out. There is Microsoft Forms that can kind of do that. But say you had an Excel spreadsheet of jobs that someone manually updated, and they needed assigning to people. You could pull that data into the Power App, and then you could see the list, and then you could say assign that to me, or this is my next job, or I've completed that job, etc. And then it would update the spreadsheet. So you can do that, and it's probably worth mentioning that these are like applications that can sit in Teams, can sit in web browser, but also you can build them for mobiles. So all you do is for a mobile is you install the Power App application from the store, sign in with your Microsoft account, your corporate account, and then you'll see your applications. And providing that you've chosen like a phone like canvas, then it will show up on there, and then you can do everything on there. So you've got, you can use it anywhere in effect. Then.
So you're not also helping me to build these app experiences easily and efficiently, without having to use maybe because if you're a process owner inside of an organization, right, and you want to wait automate some, maybe even bridge gap between different processes, like you might have, like you've just said, like you might get an Excel dump from uh, an ERP system which has got a bunch of jobs that need to be done the next day, or I've got to pick a bunch. I don't know what the it's, I'm just
Hmm.
trying to think of some really simple examples. Like I get a bunch of jobs exported from some sort of system, and now I need to go and tell X, Y, and Z, who should do what, right? And maybe, like you say, that's a CSV file or something that dumps down. You read that into your Power App, and then it shows you. You log into that every morning, and it shows you, okay, you've got job 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then you could theoretically go, okay, job 1, I want to click that and I want to assign it to somebody, and I want a special action to then happen to go and like assign it to them, or maybe just ping them an email or a Teams message or
Yeah.
whatever. I'm making a really simplified example, but I think what's really interesting about that, I've got 2 points. This is the first one is that being able to automate like that in an easy to automate way is very empowering to those teams, isn't it? Right? No reliance on IT, and I'll ask you about that probably towards the end because that's a bit of a trickier subject. No reliance on IT, no reliance on your say whatever you call your development team, like maybe you call it your IS department or your development department or anything like that, right? Rapidly deploy. And talking about deployment, which is going to be my second point, is that they're giving you an ecosystem in which to build, but also to distribute your applications with inside your organization, right? Because I can't as a in a previous life being a developer, I can't like state like the important or the complexity in distribution. If you say I want to build a native Apple and Android experience, right? You're talking about building two, maybe one application that's then built onto multiple platforms, and then sending that to app stores to be reviewed and to be published and all of those manner of things. Tens, if not hundreds of thousands of pounds to build all those things, and all of those things are important in certain places. But what you're saying to me is I can automate part of my process. I can push that out to my team. I'll use the word rapidly, and I'm using air quotes. Nobody can see that because I'm on a podcast, but I am doing that rapidly. So I can make my business processes more efficient, and I've got an ecosystem to deploy rapidly. That seems very powerful, considering you know like I think what you said is if you stick to standard controls and you don't want to go too crazy, and I mean like more than building custom controls and things like that, which I assume you can do. Um, I've got a lot of power there in terms of what I can actually accomplish, like kind of by myself, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And the the good thing about it is it's very easy to prototype things. So you don't have to make them look pretty and things. Generally when I build them, it's like I build them, I functionally get them working to prove the concept out, and then I give it to like my our head of department, or I see if marketing or something wants to then jazz do it up.
Yeah,
Put branding on it, or check, we've got the right colors and things like that. So it's very easy to get something working and very easy to understand. Oh, okay, no, I can't do it, or it's going to be a bit complicated. So let's just pause and think about something else.
yeah,
Where
but these apps could always never see the light of day to most people, right? They could be, automations and efficiency like drivers. Like that example where I get a list of jobs that gets dumped on my, in my email once a day. I'm going to load them into a Power App, and then I'm going to redistribute them out. The output to the end users are maybe emails that I've constructed or something like that. It doesn't really matter what it looks like, I suppose, right? In that
no,
scenario, so actually, it's totally flexible for what you want to achieve, I suppose. Yeah,
and that's quite true actually, in that the the application or the solution that you're building can be for you individually to help you in your day to day to do that distribution, because no one else is going to use it. You can do it for a team, you can do it for a bigger department or an area, or it could be company wide.
yeah,
It doesn't matter, because eh, there is no if you've got the licensing for it, there is no real sort of you're paying for it, so use it sort of thing.
yeah, definitely. Yeah, yeah, no, 100%. Okay, so Power Apps, easy to build, easy to distribute, line of business applications. Sounds sweet. You also talked about Power Automate. What is Power Automate? How is that working in the mix of Power Platform, and what's it attempting to achieve?
So Power Automate is in effect similar to or equivalent to Logic Apps in the Azure IaaS, or PaaS, I should say, environment. But you you potentially pay per run rather than per task, or if it's depending on what license you get, you have X amount of runs per month kind of thing. So you don't really, it doesn't matter how big it is or how small it is. You have to have that worry about how many tasks you have in your automation. Where with Logic Apps, whilst it's well, not free, whilst it's really cheap per action, if you're doing like for each loops and you're running it, for 100 times, then that obviously that sort of count increases quite a lot. So you've got to be lenient or more understanding about how you develop it. But and of course you have to have you have to have access to Azure and everything, like where this is like an area where you can't sort of break out too much from it because it's only based on the connectors you have. So it's all around automation. It is very good at doing automation around Office 365 and Exchange and Teams and things like that. It's all built for Office mainly. There are connectors to go out to other third party services um, like the Logic Apps, but the idea is in the context of the user mainly. So it's all like my access to data and moving that stuff around rather than Logic Apps being a service principal or a managed identity doing work sort of thing. So it's great in that within like a Power App you can trigger a flow. What no, an auto? Yeah, it's still a cloud flow. Um, so you can still like trigger that to go and get some data. So that could be your mechanism for pulling that data from the Excel spreadsheet and then putting the format you need and then bringing it into your Power App, or going off and sending those emails or a Teams message, etc. There's loads of things that you can do. Um, one thing around it is that within Office 365, you can do the triggers for it, which can be like reoccurring or when a Power App button is pressed. Yeah, so within Power Automate, it might be that you can pull that data from when there's a new request for a approval of a document. It might be that it enters the SharePoint site, and then that gets triggered. That triggers a Logic App, not a Logic App, sorry, a Power Automate flow, um, which then can go through and maybe check the data or um, create an approval process, which then goes off to the manager or the data protection officer, maybe if it's something sensitive, to be approved. And if it gets approved, then it can be moved into another folder. Or if it gets rejected, then you've kind of got that tracking. So you can do
Okay,
things like
so,
that.
yeah. So if Power Apps is allowing us to do things like um, a user interface, maybe data collection and things like that, um, Power Automate is really the event system is where we can sort of add like life cycle to our app, right? We could create a trigger from some sort of data store. Like you use the example of a document being dropped into a SharePoint and then creating like an approval flow, or a document. Like we'll just use our simple example of our job tasks being dropped into, let's say they get dropped into a SharePoint site or a folder in OneDrive or whatever it is, right?
Hmm.
You could then in Power Automate, you could say, okay, every time a new document is added to that SharePoint site, send me an email to let me know that it's been done. So when I arrive at work the next morning, I know whether my export is actually, because maybe the export's a bit dodgy, maybe sometimes it doesn't run, and then that adds a lot of confusion for me, right? Or it comes in between any time between 6 and 8 a.m. in the morning, so I don't actually know when to start focusing on it, right? Or like you said, when I've looked through my list of jobs and I want to assign a job to say Alan, for example, and I click on that button to say, a drop down of all my people, I'm going to assign this to Alan, and I click a button. At that point, I can trigger a flow to then, and that flow is running in the context of me, the user, right? Like you said, it's not for running as like a managed identity or a service principal, like a machine identity, right? And then as you, and because it's you and it knows who you are and it's got that context and it's got that deep integration with Office 365, you can say things like send an email from on behalf of me to Alan, telling him what job that he has to do today, that sort of thing. Uh, the flow is how you essentially get like programming logic into your Power Apps, right? Because Power Apps doesn't have that. It's more of the user interface than it is the processing engine for driving these experiences, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And another example is that using a third party sort of connector, like say you wanted to collect all of the every time you get mentioned in a Twitter, in a Twitter message, you can if you've got your account and you sign in with your connector, you'll be able to see all those like mentions. When I get mentioned, then do something. It could be put into a spreadsheet, send me an email so that I don't have to keep don't have to keep looking at Twitter. I know there's tools out there that can manage Twitter and things like that. But this is if you don't have them kind of thing, you can use Power Automate to sort of help with some of that.
Okay, so it's not just limited to Microsoft technology. We've got other SaaS platforms that have got connectors and other, you know, software systems and things like that that we can pull and trigger from and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Some of them, you could have something from like Salesforce. When a new opportunity comes in, that as simple as that, and that sends you an email. I know Salesforce can do that sort of stuff. You might want to put some context into it, or you might want to do so. You might just want it to be a Teams message rather than an email sort of thing. So
Yeah, yeah, and you might have that, like maybe when a new opportunity comes into Force, Salesforce handles like notifying you know, notifying the correct salesperson for that account, or whatever is the sales logic that's happening there. But then if you have more ops sort of processes that need to feed off of that, maybe actually what happens is um there's I don't know, you got a sales committee in that track all of those opportunities to make sure they're not missed, because they could get assigned to somebody. That person might be on holiday for 2 or 3 weeks, and somebody else gets notified, like maybe maybe a team of people get notified, and so gets put into like request tracking your side. I mean, that can probably be done in Salesforce. I'm not saying that it can't, but you might have your own customized business processes that you want to build around your tooling. Maybe so there's some gaps, or you've got some niche requirements that aren't filled by your SaaS vendor. This allows you to fill those gaps without paying for a custom development team to either build in house, which is going to cost you uh, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of pounds a year, or find an outsourced partner that's got all of these different skill sets that can wire these things together, right?
yeah, it also means that you're right that as the example of Salesforce, you might be able to do it, but you might have to learn how you build that logic in that app, and then another app might be slightly different. This is like a single platform that you might understand to be able to do some of that. So it's just it's a helping tool that if you don't know if you because
Yeah.
there's the other thing of you might not have permission to do that logic per se as an individual, and you want to bring it in for you or for your team sort of thing. So there's that as
Yeah,
well.
so you might have permission to say read or to read or consume, but you might not have like automation power in that SaaS app. It might not even exist, right?
Yeah.
Or if it does exist, you might not have access to it. You might not have licensed it. So this is a way to add process and automation, potentially from other systems, right? And there is from what I know, and you could probably give a bit more context, but there is a large connector library, right? There's a huge amount of
Yeah.
different. Do you know roughly the sort of size of that connector ecosystem? Is it
No.
thousands? I assume
Yeah,
it's.
there's
I
there
assume
there
it's
is there is loads in there. I don't know what the numbers are.
the numbers are, but we're talking a lot. Like not just this isn't just a
Y-
new ecosystem that has like less than 100 connectors. We're talking about thousands of connectors that other people are building and implementing, right?
yeah, and depending on, I mean, we'll talk about sort of the licensing perspective, but you can also build custom connectors. Um, I've done a few of them very lightly, but I haven't had the need to use them. But it might be if you've got a custom system, like where those jobs are, that actually you can pull it directly, and there's the automation is Power Automate to do your export.
Yeah, and maybe we're jumping ahead a little bit here, but is this coming back to the sort of same theme that we talked about in episode 13 around architecting serverless applications, right? Where we're saying that even though there is a very, I call it simplistic user experience, and a low, I'll call it a low barrier to entry in these systems, there are still opportunities to build custom connectors and custom experiences if you do have that resource in house, right? If you
Mhm.
do happen to have a team that can build Dynamics connectors, no, sorry, Power Platform connectors, or or whatever they're called. You can do that if you want to, right? You can build custom controls for Power Apps and everything in between, right?
Yeah, absolutely, and also you're right. I think I don't know if you were kind of coming back to that in that within Power Platform you can trigger a Logic app because it's just a HTTP request with data, or a function app if you need to do that more complex stuff or to do really custom stuff. So it's not you're not tied to this platform. Everything is here. That's all you can do. You can pull out to those other technologies or services. So
Yeah, because I assume the only way that Power Platform really is accessible to a lot of different people is if there is interoperability between different systems, right? It has to be able to collaborate because it can't build all of the functionality in its ecosystem, right? It would be too complex to learn and to
yeah.
understand and onboard, and that's not the point. The point is like, here's the building blocks. If you do want to get fancy and like call out to a function app and do a bunch of processing, then you can do that if you want to, or you can, if you do want to simply fill gaps, then you can do that in a rapid sort of way.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we've kind of been talking about cloud flows here, but there is another section which I've not really I dived into when it came out first, but I've not used it for a while, so it's probably improved quite a lot. But it's desktop flows, and this is robotic processing um, automation, so RPA. So this is actually running on a machine and doing moving around a screen, doing logging into a website or doing stuff on an actual machine. So there is sort of two modes. There's like attended and unattended. So one where you're actually on the machine and it does stuff, or versus it's a process in the background. So that kind of opens up again the ability that if there isn't any APIs or you can't create a custom connector and you just need to go into a website and tick a button and download a file, then potentially you could do that or fill out a form that isn't part of your systems.
Got it. So even if they can't be web experiences, you've got like some sort of desktop application that you do want to automate in some fashion, right? Um, then you've also got the ability to not do cloud flows, but actually on desktop and on machine and hooked into that. I haven't actually seen that before. I'm gonna have a real look at that because that looks really
Yeah, in,
powerful. To
in
be honest.
essence, what you do is when you create one, you go on the machine you want to do it on, and you can, in effect, press record, and then you start, pressing on the screen and going through the different forms, and it captures it, and you can go through the steps it's chosen and make sure they're all correct, kind of thing, and then you save it, and then it can like redo it, sort of thing.
Yeah.
So,
It's interesting because it really reminds me of my like cloud and app testing days where we have things like Selenium and other like app based ones, because we used to really struggle with like automating like mobile app testing because there's no real like hook, right? There's
mm.
the screen is like touch. You would have to have like a robot press the screen sort of thing, right? And but the web has always been like really well, you can hook into web experiences really easily because you've got the DOM and you've got like the web browser. So it'd be really interesting to see how it hooks into like different applications that maybe aren't designed for like automation, if that makes sense.
Mm.
I assume like things like all the Microsoft apps like just work, I assume, right? I'm guessing that their ecosystem is like recorderable, or is it just simply a case of it's just doing X and Y click, and then it's waiting 5 seconds and X and Y click, like I don't know. It'd be really interesting to see how they've actually approached that challenge,
Yeah, I
right?
can't
'Cause
I can't remember what it was like before. I think it was I can't remember what it is. I think it was like maybe I think they might have like bought a product in or acquired a product to basically bring it
to
in.
help with that, yeah,
Because I
yeah,
think at the time it was branded, branded with the previous company sort of thing. But um yeah,
yeah, that's
I've
great.
like,
Okay.
used it for like a couple of years. So
Yeah.
I had a look at it when it first came out. So
No, I'm definitely putting that on my list, and we'll definitely do an episode about that in the future because that sounds awesome. Okay. so one of the other areas that you talked about was Power BI. So can you just give us an overview of what Power BI is and what it's trying to achieve?
Yeah, so Power BI is a visualization and analytics tool. So it allows you to, as I kind of said, visualize your data, and you can manipulate the data. And this can be, again, this can be from a CSV, a Excel spreadsheet, um, the Dataverse, or a SQL database, whatever it might be. You can connect to those data sources, and then you'll see the tables, or it will represent tables, and then you can do in effect build your queries on it. I can't remember what type. It's like I can't remember the query language that it
Power
does.
Query.
Yeah, well, yeah, okay,
Pa-
Power Query then.
yeah, Power Query.
Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, you can do that. So you can create calculated fields and things like that. But again, it's really simple to generate these reports and dashboards. So you can it is in essence, again, you can drag and drop like different charts or tables, and then choose your data, and then decide how you want to what color you want it to be. And you can also get external uh, controls, can't you, Sam? I think it is, isn't it? And
Yeah.
stuff in the color, making the colors a bit better and things like that. But you can do that for from like the licensing perspective. If you just had Power BI, which is part of like the Office 365 E3, um, you can just do that for yourself. You can just build dashboards for yourself. But if you want to share it within internally, then it is a pro license at that point. But generally, it's really easy to start getting that data visualized, and we see a lot of whilst it is just sort of we're talking about it within the Power Platform environment. You can have within Azure, you can host your own Power BI embedded service where you can in fact build your reports and put them up there for consumption. I've not done too much with that. I think you've done a little bit with that, Sam, haven't you? Or at least done some testing with it.
Yeah, Power BI embedded. Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, that is in essence what it is. It's showing that those reports, things like that, and you can build reports with different different metrics in the report itself. But then you can build a dashboard which then has different metrics from different pages. So you might have a report for everyone consumed, but they might have that high level view or this department's view, etc. So you don't have to worry about giving the full access to the report and that. So
Yeah, I mean, where I've seen Power BI really work is finance teams absolutely love Power BI because what finance teams generally tend to have is like a bunch of Excel spreadsheets. They might have like an export from, maybe their ERP system or something like that, and then they traditionally would just munge it together with like Excel charts and and stuff like
pivot
that, right?
tables and
But yeah, it would
yeah.
just be crazy. And what Power BI? It's somebody years ago. Somebody described Power BI as the is like PowerPoint for data, and I think that's a really good like sort of mashup of thoughts, right? Where effectively you have your um you can bring in things like Excel spreadsheets, which people like understand. I'll call them like normal people understand those. And then you can effectively visualize that data, and you can transform it, you can slice it, you can do all these, like Alan said, you can do Power Query, and you can get all really advanced, like you can do with everything else. But what is great is where you can ingest maybe multiple Excel spreadsheets, combine their outputs together, and I would say relatively simply. I mean, it depends on your data set, but you can really get some really good looking. And I mean, when we're talking about really good looking, right? Designers would shout at me about like this looking good. But in the benchmark of the enterprise, some of these things do look absolutely amazing. For what's for the amount of money it costs and the amount of effort that is involved in at least becoming dangerous with Power BI, you can really start to get some really good great experiences out of it. So yeah, again, Power BI is a beast anyway. There's many ways to run it, to consume it, to use it. All of those different things. But I think, yeah, Power BI is another, a really powerful part of the Power Platform. Because at the end of the day, these experiences are consumed by people, and people love visual experiences, right? Who wants to look at an Excel spreadsheet with some tables in it and then like five tabs with maybe you know some crummy charts at the end of it? Or you could browse through a lovely Power BI dashboard, that's got maybe a bit of Gucci animation branded on colors. I used to work for a company who we used to do quite a lot of Power BI, and what we would do is we would design out the Power BI dashboards, and then we would give it to our designer in the Power BI desktop application. Um, and our designer would absolutely hate it because there wasn't enough control, as they said, and the customization. We also fired back with, if we wanted to build our own custom controls, it would cost us an absolute fortune. So we didn't end up doing that. But what they were able to produce with even the, I'll call it, limited customization that's built in out of the box, was quite frankly ridiculously impressive. Right? It's more the their input to it. So I have seen some very 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 good looking Power BI dashboards with very little like technical input, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think that sort of hits it on the nail on the head, in effect, doesn't it? That it, it's when you start going into it, it is very easy to get that data visualized, and you don't need to you don't need to know how to be an analyst of data, a data analyst per se. Obviously, if you have those skills, then you'll be able to do some of this stuff quite quickly. But in general, anybody can look at it and go, well, I want to see, what's the top 10 sales this month from this report, and it's quite easy to sort of get that data.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, and most of the time visualization of data is that simple in the organization, right? It's not like, you know, really Gucci different interfaces and this and that. It's actually just they've done all the hard work of understanding their data models internally, and they need an output, and they need a way to distribute it, right? Like we heard about with Power Apps, Power BI embeddable pretty much anywhere, right?
Well, what I was going to say as well is you can actually embed the Power BI report slash dashboards into your Power Apps, so
Yeah,
you can
exactly.
so you
And then
can have
embed
it.
those into teams, like
Yeah.
embedception. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah, and that's it. And I think let's just talk about that point just for a second, because I think that's important for people to understand is how closely linked these products are and how their integration is, right? Because we have just joked flippantly about that there, but that is very powerful, to be able to bring in BI into an app where you could then be making decisions and then have that whole experience served up to somebody effectively in their team's client and or on their mobile device.
What, in fact, it can work the other way, in that you can embed a Power App into Power BI, so it could be like the whole 360 like scenario there. But in effect, when you select some data, the act the the values can then be brought into that Power App. So it could be like, if you like that report we were talking about, what jobs are coming up, you could select one of those jobs and then click, a user, and then submit it, and it would go off and update the back end data, but also go and send that email, and just
Yeah,
create like a simple like button, make the dashboard more than just a dashboard, being able to actually do actions from it, run flows and things like that from it all. Yeah, cloud
yeah,
flows.
exactly. Okay, and the last bit that I think you talked about was virtual agents. That's not something I've ever really had any exposure to. So, Alan, what are virtual agents?
So I've not really had much exposure to it either, but in essence, it's building chatbots or virtual agents. So this is baked into the Power, the Power Platform kind of side of things. So you could be something in Teams, but also it can go onto other like services like Facebook, or I'm thinking of some other ones. Maybe it now can do like WhatsApp and things like that, where you can have like a conversation or going through the FAQs or the support side of things. Um, so it's all sort of powered by AI. It all kind of backs onto the Azure bot framework, which I have done some stuff in the past with. So you can build your logic. I mean, at the time that when I was doing it, it was all code, but this is in effect showing it visually. So being able to say, well, when the chat starts, then send this message saying, hi, this is ITC secure, as an example. What how can we help you today? And then the response that comes back from that, you can then get it to go and do some querying and get some data, maybe your FAQ, or maybe what you want to do. Is it like submit a support ticket, and then when you do that, it asks you for all that information. Do that data gathering, and then it could submit it to a Power Automate, and then it goes off and puts it into the ticketing system, etc. So, like I said, I've not had much exposure to it, but that's the kind of things that you can do. And yeah, and like I said, it can be in teams.
Okay, so bot driven, even conversationally driven um, flows of logic can happen there with maybe more complex decision trees as well, because we have talked about it was right. We have had a thing about bot framework in cognitive services before, haven't we? Have we talked about that on the podcast?
Don't we haven't this season? Maybe we did last season. I would
Yeah,
have to double
maybe.
check, but
But
yeah.
if you've never used bot framework before, it is definitely not. It is. It is. Well, for what it's doing, it is very, very, very effective at what it does and very easy to use. But there is a barrier to entry in terms of building those experiences. Right? You do have to. There is a builder, but this is taking it to the lowering that barrier to entry even more. If I'm hearing this right, it's like the SaaS version of that pass bot framework. The functionality.
Yeah, that's what I believe. I mean, like I said, I haven't really been able to use it. 'Cause, the licensing is that you have to buy so many sessions, sort of thing. So you have to like commit to using it, kind of thing. There is some trials, but by the
Yeah.
time you've got by the time you've got some time to sort of look into it, the trials ended, sort of thing. For us, anyway.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so let's you just led me on a great segue to our next section actually there about cost, because I think this is quite complicated. So yeah, Alan, how much does it cost? Is this going to cost me an arm and a leg? Am I going to get good return on investment on this? How do I work this out?
Okay, so within Office 365 E3 and some of the other SKUs, I haven't researched all of them. You do get a level of Power Apps and Power Automate, and this is like I think the license is Power Automate and Power Apps for Office 365. So this means that you can use in effect, all of the Office 365 connectors, but you can't use any of the premium connectors. Now, we didn't really talk about the connectors and their differences, but premium connectors are in effect like the third-party ones, really, and a few more that go into like Azure and things like that, HTTP requests. So when you're doing more complex things, then you have to, in effect, you're paying for that extra functionality.
Is that
So
effectively anytime you leave Office 365, not Microsoft, but Office 365
yes,
universe?
as well as Dataverse, because Dataverse is kind of sort of based on
So
Dynamics,
Dataverse isn't
really.
premium, you're saying? Yeah,
Is
it's that
premium,
sync.
yes.
It is premium. Dataverse is
Yes.
premium. Okay, fine. Right.
Yeah. So it is all about the data in Office and things like that.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
that covers Power Apps and Power Automate from the connector perspective.
Can I just ask
Um,
you another quick question about that?
yep.
Because I suppose if we're talking about just data and items inside of Office 365, presumably you're already paying for an Office 365 license, aren't you?
Yes.
To store data in your OneDrive, to send emails and to do all of those things. You're effectively just automating those actions that you would have potentially taken manually. Whereas what you're saying is if you want to go to a separate system, even even Dataverse, that is outside the scope of any current licensing you would have, right? So it makes sense that it would be
Y-
premium at that point.
Yeah, absolutely. And as kind of the license sort of details, it's for Office 365, so it is kind of pushing you that way. But
Okay, cool.
there is absolutely tons you can do with that license
Okay,
that you
yeah.
probably already got. Um, so if you want to use the premium connectors, and that includes Dataverse, um, it is there's 3 ways of doing it. One is per user. So per user means that user can run as many apps as they want and consume as many premium connectors as they want, and that is $20. I'm doing it in dollars because that's what Microsoft sort of they always show us. The
Is that
the
$20 per month?
Yeah, $20 per month, yeah, per
Okay.
user.
Yeah.
And at the moment, I think if I got this right, there's potentially a 40% discount if you're over 2,000 plus licenses. But you have to contact the sales support. I have to look at we have to look at licenses before these because there's always a change. So we can never
Yeah, it's
predict
very
what it's going to be.
confusing. Yeah.
so
Yeah.
so
The
that's
bill's
what she's
either going
come
to
up
be
on.
absolutely massive or it's going to be tiny. It's like
Yeah.
it's never in between with
So
this. Yeah.
So yes, there is potentially a discount there. So if you have got more than 2,000 users or licenses, then maybe check that out. The other way of doing it is per user per app. So if there's like a corporate app that it's got a load of automation in it, maybe you've built an app that does multiple things. So it's not just like doing one thing. You've built like yeah, the app's got multiple pages that do multiple things. So that it's quite a massive, big app sort of thing. Um, you pay per user per app, and that is $5 per month per user. So, and if a user uses 2 apps, then you got to use it, pay twice. In effect, you got to give them in effect get 2 licenses. I don't know how you actually assign that, but that's how it's envisioned to work. So, in effect, if you got users using 4 apps, then you jump to the to the $20.
Yeah, but if
But
you're if you but if your organization just like wasn't making like bespoke apps for specific people and they just had like say one app and like 10 people used it, then you wouldn't license those 10 people for like full power apps, would you? You just license them at $5
yeah,
each per month. Yeah.
yep, and that is if you're breaking out of those areas and it's premium apps at that point.
Got
If
it.
you're using
That's
Office
awesome. Yeah.
365, you can build as many as you want and things like that.
Okay.
Excuse me. Um, okay, and there is another way. So you can attach your subscription or your Power Platform to an Azure subscription, and you can pay as you go. So you can basically it comes out of consumption rather than subscription, and this is $10 per active user per app.
Per
So I
month.
think this is being more. It's a little bit more expensive because obviously the $5 per user per app is that you might buy a 12 months contract or you got to keep it for 90 days, haven't you?
Yeah.
Sort of thing. This is if the user has used an app or 2 apps, then you get charged for that. So it's then there's pros and cons to it, isn't it? Because if you've got an app that maybe you've got 100 users and maybe each user maybe only used it like once or twice over 6 months, then that's only like five 10 or $20 over total, not per month.
Yeah.
It,
Yeah.
yeah, I
I
think
see what I see what you
there's a
mean.
lot
Yeah.
of calculations with that,
Yeah.
but
Let's say you had a premium app that was only used 1 month of every year. Like maybe you had an app that was only used at year end for finance. I don't know. I mean, just trying to
yeah,
think of some example of like
that
how it
everyone
works
had
out.
to
But
use. Yeah.
all the finance team had to use it, right?
Hmm.
So let's say your finance team's like 20 people, right? You could then just pay $200 for that 1 month, couldn't you? For the $10,
Hmm.
let's say you just have one app, and then instead of paying um yeah, so instead of paying 20 lots of $5 every month, which would be $100 a month for the whole of the year, right? Because you would only pay $200 instead of like if it was $200 a month, then well, $100 a month, you'd pay $1,200 a year, wouldn't you? So
Yeah, well,
that is
you'd
a
have to
huge
keep it
saving.
for. Yeah, you'd have to based on the Microsoft license, you'd have to keep it 3 months minimum
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
beforehand, or you might
and
buy
and
the
also
12 months.
manage all of that, right? Like
Yeah.
you'd have to like turn the licenses on, then turn them off, and not forget to turn them off, and all of those different things, right? Whereas this is like if we detect that somebody has used an app, put in that month, then we're going to charge you $10. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's pros and cons to it. So, but yeah, that's the Power Apps licensing. Um, Power Automate, similar thing. So $15 per user to use Cloudflows, and generally, if you've got Power Apps licensing, you generally get Power Automate Premium as well. Just for as far as I'm aware, that's what happens because you can't. Power Apps needs flows to do the extra
Okay.
functionality sort of thing. So
Right.
so you generally get that. So if you're just using automation, you don't need an interface. Then it's $15 per user um, per month to use Cloudflows. Um,
Unlimited flows, unlimited runs.
yes, yep.
Okay.
If you're using RPA, so desktop flows, and they're in attended mode, which I guess it just means that you're there on the screen or you're actively using that machine. It is $40 per user, but I'm guessing it's because there's a lot more technology doing stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
So there's that. Um, and then you've got the pay as you go version, and this is 60 cents per flow run. So maybe you only run something with premium connectors once a month, maybe end of month
Yeah.
runs. Instead of paying for X users to have access to it to run it, you only pay 60 cents for that one run or maybe two runs. For desktop flows, so RPA again on the in the attended mode, it is 60 cents per run. So that might
Okay.
work out cheaper again. It depends than the $40 attended. I guess you got to kind of work it out if how many times you're running that process.
Yeah, it's 60 cents a pop. That's quite a lot of runs to hit $40, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. Again, if you're only doing it once, twice a month, or whatever, then it's
Yeah.
worth doing. Um, the other one is if you're doing unattended mode for desktop flow. So I'm guessing this is might be running on a server somewhere, no one's logged in. It just goes off and in effect logs in and does that process. Then it's $3 per run.
Wow, okay. Right. So to not have the person sitting there in attended mode, they're gonna charge you an extra $2.40 for that privilege, I
Yeah, I
suppose.
I guess there's some part of that where it's got to log onto the machine, and there's obviously a bit more to it than that. And obviously, you're not paying for someone to be sat there, I guess. So there's a
So
lot of more
so
benefit.
so is there no flat monthly cost for unattended mode? Because I think you said that the
No, I don't. I
$40 per
didn't
month
see
for
anything.
right. Okay.
Hmm. There were
Yeah,
some
that's
other
interesting.
additional licensing or add-ons, but this is getting complicated as it is. So
Yeah, it's already taken a lot longer than any other
yeah.
conversation we've ever had about pricing. So yeah, I completely let you off, Alan. Like it's well done so far.
Okay, so that's it for Power Automate.
Yeah.
Power BI. So again, with Office 365, there is normally a Power BI license, a standard one where you can build dashboards and things like that for yourself. So you can do some visualizations for yourself. But if you want to share it, then you got to get Power BI Pro, and that is $9.99. I don't know why they didn't round it up to $10 like everything else, but $9.99 per user per month. So that's that. There is a Power BI Premium. Now I couldn't quite work out what's in there. I think there's more around AI data modeling and a few bits like that, and some more advanced features. That is $20 per user per month. Or if you've got a lot of dashboarding or data and things like that running, processing, then you can buy capacity. Now, Sam, you might know a little bit more about how capacity works, but this is $4,995 per month.
Yeah, so it's effectively when you buy capacity, you're buying like blended CPU and memory for because Power BI does a lot of caching of the data in memory, if I remember correctly. So what can happen is if you have lots of processing that happens and they're large Power BI files, because some of them do, the data models are massive and the data that they crunch is pretty big. You can hit sort of capacity limits and things like that with even like the Power BI Premium and things like that. Um, There is also one other way to run Power BI, is also the embedded model. So, what Power BI, when you buy that capacity unit, that $5,000 a month, right? It allows you to effectively do everything that you can normally do, like things like embed in Teams and absolute. You get your Power BI environment, and it just seamlessly integrates with the cloud. I'll call it the cloud version of Power BI. But what you can do is you can also run what's called Power BI embedded, and the name is, well, the clue is in the name. It's still resource driven, so you actually license it in Azure Power BI embedded, um, and you can effectively say you're running your own Power BI instance at that point, but you can't use any of the niceties of like seeing it. You have to embed it yourself, basically manually in your own applications. So it's more for like, let's say I build a SaaS app that does something and I need some sort of dashboarding system to go into it, like some sort of BI system. I can buy Power BI embedded and then embed it inside of my application. I think it starts at around $600 to $700 a month. I think is the cheapest that you can get away with on that, but it is like drastically cheaper than $5,000 a month, and it allows you to like embed it absolutely everywhere. So that's also another like big bonus and plus with it
Yeah, and
as well.
you can get access to a sandbox sort of environment, can't you? Just to test your dashboarding and stuff before you maybe commit to that embedded costing
That's
as well,
that's
can't you?
that's correct. Yeah. And the other part I don't really know because I haven't done it is Power BI on prem as well. There's an on prem server as well, I believe. I don't know how that sits in the whole pricing matrix and everything like that.
I
I
don't
haven't
know.
I haven't actually deployed that before, but that does. I think that exists. I don't know if I'm getting confused with
Yeah, it
Tableau.
does. It does exist.
It does.
Um,
I'm sure it does. Yeah, I've just never actually. I've personally never been involved in its deployment before because yeah, all the people I've ever done it with have either just paid for Power BI Pro or just bought embedded basically.
yeah, I think you still need one of these licenses to be able to like distribute your dashboarding or your report to it. Still,
Okay,
um,
right. Yeah.
so
Okay. Yeah.
yeah, so that's it for Power BI. I think we've covered everything on that one. So virtual agents. So again, not really used this yet, sort of thing, but in effect, it is $200 per month for 2,000 sessions. So I'm guessing that is 2,000 chats that you have with some, on with the bot. Um, that's it. So I guess you just keep adding, the sessions. You just keep adding the sessions to it to be able to do it. So it's not per user. It's per sessions on that environment. So you might have multiple bots or virtual agents and running it. What you can do is, it did say for a limited time, but you can add 1,000 sessions on top of the 2,000 add-on for £100. So they're in effect giving you the chance to not have to buy 2,000 at a time if you're like increasing your
Right. I
your
see.
capacity, I guess.
But your minimum commit is 2,000 sessions and minimum like cost of $200 per month to get
Yeah,
started on that ecosystem.
yeah. There
Right. Okay.
there is trials for it and things like that, but I think you've got to have that to even start developing. I
Okay.
think.
Yeah, we've seen that in other areas like with Defender for IoT and things like that, where they have this new sort of minimal commit but still consumption based model. It's like a blend of commit versus consumption, right? Because it is still tiered in terms of its pricing. So it is relatively I would say fair, but that barrier to entry can be quite high, especially if you want to just have you know, let's say you're a small business and you only have like one or two sessions with that in a month. These these pricing models aren't really that nice to those sorts of situations, right?
No, but I guess then you got to consider how much it would cost to have one of those built for you, I guess, and how much it'd be per month as well. So there's
With
there's
that
things like
with
that
that
as well.
yeah, and that conversation is a whole can of worms that we talk about all the time, right? About what stuff should really cost and what people think they should cost, if that
Yes.
makes sense. So yeah, 100% definitely.
But yeah, that's it for licensing as far as I'm aware. There are a few things they didn't add on there because there's too much info here for this anyway.
Well, it's okay. Our licensing chat only took 15 minutes when it usually takes like 3 or 4 seconds. So yeah, it was definitely in depth enough. That's for sure. Okay, right. So let me try and it was so just before I go into reflections, Alan. Is there anything else that you think you've missed, or you want people to really understand and sort of digest from Power Platform?
Uh, there's there are admin controls for the Power Platform environment. I haven't kind of gone into them, but you can lock down which connectors you can and can't use from a data, exfiltration perspective. Because I suppose in theory you could get something to synchronize a spreadsheet and send it to Dropbox, things like that, I suppose. But you can turn off connectors or allow certain people to do it. You can have different environments, so you can have one for different departments if you wanted to, so that data or those flows aren't seen by others. But the only other part is solutions. And solutions are basically where you can bring flows, power apps, and things like that into one area, and it can be managed. So you can kind of build uh, uh, an application lifecycle for it. So you can have like a developer version which is unmanaged, and then you can export it and put it into like the production environment within Power Platform if you wanted to manage, so no one can make changes to it. So there's a bit of that in there as well, but that's starting to get bit more into a bit more advanced in development and stuff like that.
Okay, yeah, no, great, yeah, and and yeah, uh, maintenance and management of these systems, and I think because it will be when we add flexibility for people, sometimes we do lose control of these systems, and we don't want to get it into a scenario where it's like a wild west inside of our organization, right? From a data, because there's data governance and sharing and all of those things to think about. But I think those controls are there and in place, and like Alan said, it was already enough. We're not going to go into that depth, at this point. That could be an episode in itself, So yeah. Okay, let me just run through some reflections, and we'll let people get on with their lives. So main points: easy to get apps up and running, intuitive experience building, interface building, ways to distribute your apps, and that is empowering users to automate simple and even complex processes in their day-to-day professional lives, right? So that's what we're really here for. We're really here for automation. We're here for breaking down those repetitive tasks, those boring tasks that people are having to do every day, potentially making mistakes, because we're human and we all make mistakes, and that's part of being human. So let's let technology and AI and brains take over, that part of our mundane existence. Licensing is, I use the word complex. It is a bit of a shame that even though it is an ecosystem of products that are like tightly integrated with each other, there is not one singular be all license, is there, Alan? I don't think there's no one singular like.
No,
I can't just go buy E5 and get absolutely everything, right? It's still
no,
like
it
it's
is all
still
add-on even to E5. So, but
yeah,
the
yeah,
Power App license gives you, like I said, Power Apps and a Power Automate, I believe.
yeah,
So that's
yeah.
the
So
closest
you
one
you
to a
you
thing.
could, if you wanted to really get started, you could get your Power Apps Premium. Is it called Power Apps? Yeah, you could get your Power Apps licensing, get your Power Automate licensing, like bundled in with that. Buy yourself Power BI Premium or Power BI Pro, and you'd have the vast majority of coverage for you to get started. As an individual, if that makes sense. It then starts to get a bit more complicated if you've got 2,000
Yeah,
seats or
if you
something like that.
needed the premium connectors and things like that, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So you might not even need them. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. So it is a bit of a exploration, in the discovery to find that out. But with all of that said, you do get a cracking amount of capability, right? That is, I think that is, you can effectively build kind of anything with it, right? And there's components and controls and flows and steps and things like that we just haven't even talked about. So so I think the capability is there, and I would also say that there is a vibrant ecosystem around Power Platform, right? Power Apps. There are a lot of um, Power Platform specialists out there building, the gaps in between what Microsoft is providing, and building a community of knowledge and controls and integrations there, which I think is, also really important and really powerful. So yeah, um, thank you ever so much for that, Alan. That was a bit of a beast. We're up to an hour and 10 or something like that, so we're definitely getting there. So what is our next episode that we're going to be talking about, Alan?
So I think we promised it about 3 weeks ago, after the Sentinel one, or I think maybe even before that. But we're gonna, yeah, between us, we're gonna talk about Microsoft or XDR, and Microsoft's view or take on XDR. Um,
Yeah,
so yeah,
yeah. XDR is a really in our security space is a very important topic at the moment, and I think it's worth having that conversation. Well, we both think it's worth having that conversation now because there is a lot of there's a lot of marketing, a lot of buzz around XDR, and we want to try and distill what it is that is actually going on there. And there are some massive tangible benefits to XDR that we're really on board with, and we are really pushing towards. So and it's going to be our last episode of the season, isn't it, Alan? I think it's number 20, isn't it?
yeah,
So we're going to go out with the XTR bang. There will be another episode after that, won't there, Alan? With like a
yeah.
wrap up
Wash up,
episode,
yeah,
wash up episode. So if you're just here for the tech, you might not just want to hear us babbling on that wash up call. But yeah, so XDR is going to be the next episode. If you've enjoyed this episode, please do consider subscribing if you'd like to listen to more of this sort of content in the future. We have many more topics that we'd like to cover, and your listens and support is what will continue to fuel the podcast going forward.
We also have the ability for you to give us feedback. Did you enjoy this episode? Disagree with our thoughts? Or were there anything that we missed? Please, use the form that's in the show notes, to give us some feedback. We'd love to hear from you.
Thanks very much for your time, Alan, and thanks for everybody that's listening. And we'll catch you on the next one.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Speak to you soon. Bye.